I believe that this dance is probably a Tutsi dance. However, the dancers themselves, I think, are Hutu, although the king is a Tutsi. The Tutsis are the traditional ruling class, and they're frequently over 7 feet tall and rather thin. You may very well know them as the Watusi. When you put a Wa or a Ba in front of an ethnic group's name, you're referring to the entire ethnic group if you're using Swahili. Hutus make up 80 or 85% of the population of Rwanda. Most of the rest, about 15% or a little more, tend to be Tutsi. There is a third ethnic group called Twa, which means pygmies or bush people. When Europeans arrived around the 1890s, the Tutsis were clearly in control. This is a picture of the last fully traditional Tutsi king. And these are Europeans in white, and the Tutsis are behind them so that you can get a feel for what the size difference is. The first of these peoples to inhabit this particular area were probably the Pygmies. The Hutu are a type of Bantu-speaking people, which appeared in this area probably about 1,000 years ago, or perhaps considerably before that even. The Bantu got their start maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years ago in the Lake Chad and Nigeria areas, and then they spread eventually all over sub-Saharan Africa. They're the most common language group now in all of sub-Saharan Africa. So the Twa, the Pygmies, have been here almost since the beginning, since the last ice age, perhaps before. The Hutu have been here for 1,000 or 2,000 years, perhaps, and the Tutsi probably came in at around 1300 AD. Exactly where the Tutsis come from is highly controversial. All three groups today speak a Bantu language, but it's unclear that the Tutsis came in with the Bantu. DNA tests suggest that they did. However, earlier studies suggested that the Tutsis were Nilotic or Kushite, indicating that they came in from the Nile River Valley or from Ethiopia. In any event, the Hutus and the Tutsis both have a culture which is based around cattle raising. Houses are generally made out of grass and wood fiber materials, in sort of a beehive shape. In the front yard, they have a palisade surrounding a courtyard. And on this particular house, you can see that there are 3 little sticks sticking up. The pole at the top of the house is common to all houses, but those other 2, that indicates that this is a royal house, and you can tell that that's what it means because if you take a look at the royal family, you can see that they're wearing 2 little horns, and it's those little horns that those sticks represent. But what's really interesting is the royal cattle. If you take a look at the royal cattle, the first thing that strikes you is those horns. And those horns are extremely reminiscent of the kind of horns that you see on pharaonic cattle. That is, the kind of cattle that were being raised in ancient Egypt. Just like all other cowboys, the Hutus and the Tutsis sing to their cattle. It probably calms them. But in this particular case, the song happens to be a song praising the various wonderful qualities of this particular group of cattle. During the 19th century, the Tutsis expanded their control. They controlled territory up into what is now Uganda and parts of the Congo, as well as Rwanda. The Tutsis were expanding all the way to Lake Kivu, which is where the Rwandan border meets the Congo border today. This is Lake Kivu, and in the 19th century, the Tutsis were threatening to completely surround Lake Kivu. Then they made a political mistake. The Tutsis were backing the Germans, and because World War I did not turn out well for Germany, Rwanda was eventually broken up and turned over to the Belgians for administration. The old king that favored the Germans and was a traditional king, not a Christian, he was removed by the Belgians and replaced with his more pliable son. This bridge crosses the current Congo-Rwanda border. Everything on this side of the bridge is, of course, Rwanda. Everything on the other side of the bridge is the Congo. Incidentally, I'm told that the haze you see is entirely natural. It was here even before there was automobile pollution.
I'm in Rwanda, but behind me is the Congo, and the lake in between is Lake Kivu. Now, Lake Kivu is one of the rift lakes. It's being made by the volcanic forces that are causing the earth to open up. And the result is it's a very deep lake. One of the other results is that it has a buildup of concentrated methane and carbon dioxide very deep in the lake. If that carbon dioxide and methane should happen to erupt at some point, if they'd happen to explode at some point, and this could be done if there was a landslide or an earthquake or something, then it's possible that you could have as many as 2 million people here killed.
This volcanic region does have something going for it, and that's volcanic soil. You can grow just about anything in Rwanda, I'm convinced. The climate is perfect for growing nearly everything. This happens to be a tea plantation, but they also grow coffee, potatoes, and almost anything else that you can possibly imagine.
Go ahead, keep driving.
Well, the people are friendly anyway. Incidentally, this is a crop that you may not have expected. This is a crop of daisies. Yes, daisies. These daisies are not used as flowers. They're used as the source for peritherium. which is the Latin for daisy, and that is an insecticide. I use that to treat my clothes before I go overseas. Rwanda is called the land of 1,000 hills, but I'd say that that's probably an underestimate. And each one of those hills, where it's possible, it's under cultivation, and they use terraced farming to a fairly large extent, or at least contour farming. We're in Nyungwe National Park. Nyungwe Forest is the largest block of montane forest left in eastern or central Africa. It's about 600 square miles in size, and it's also one of the most ancient. It dates back to some time before the last ice age. In the last ice age, most places along the equator got frost. However, this area never did, and so it maintained its vegetation. Nyungwe Forest has 200 different kinds of trees, 13 different kinds of primates, and about 300 different bird species. About 24 of those bird species are restricted to just a few of the montane forests here along the Albertine Rift. The Nyungwe Forest is in the southwestern part of Rwanda, not too far from Lake Kivu. On the satellite map, it's that green splotch, and I've outlined the border of the park in red. The reason for that is because outside the park, trees are cut down for firewood on a fairly regular basis. But inside the park, you can find all kinds of vegetation, including orchids and bromeliads, and there is one type of plant that is extremely interesting to me. It's called a giant lobelia. Now, in the United States, we have small lobelia plants, but this giant lobelia is about 9 or 10 feet tall. Do you remember John Speck, the guy that discovered that Lake Victoria was the source of the Nile, and Stanley that confirmed it? Well, I told you we were coming back to them, and in fact we are right now. Streams that originate in the Nyungwe Forest go either to the River Congo or into the River Nile. Now that means that the Lake Victoria is not really the source of the Nile. That is, the water comes from further away than that. It comes from the Nyungwe Forest, and that was discovered in 1897 by a German by the name of Kant. In 2006, Kant's discovery of the source of the Nile was confirmed by a GPS reading. He was only about 10 miles off from the actual source of the Nile. I'm moving on now to a geological feature in the forest which is really quite striking, and it reminds me very much of the Ngorongoro crater. It is a crater, a volcanic crater, and at the bottom of this crater there is, instead of a lake, a bog. In fact, this is the largest bog in Africa, and it is called the swamp that swallows elephants. Yes, there were elephants in this swamp. In fact, hundreds of them up until just a couple of decades ago. The last one was shot in 1999 by poachers. Up until last year, there were two kinds of elephants in the world, African and Indian. However, last year, the African elephants got divided in two. There are savanna African elephants and forest African elephants, and these were forest elephants. Elephants are big, but this is one of the most impressive animals in the entire forest. This is the army ant called Dorylus by scientists. It's also known as driver ants, safari ants, or in Swahili, siafu. Now, when food supplies become short, as they do every season, they form marching columns of up to 50 million ants. And they are considered a menace to people and almost all the animals in the forest as well. But they only move at the rate of about 20 meters an hour. So because they only move at about 60 feet an hour, you can get out of the way. Now, these ants are of two kinds basically. The smaller ones are worker ants, and the ones with the larger heads, those are the soldiers. The soldiers, you'll see, are on the sidelines for the most part of the column, protecting the column. Their jaws are open. These ants are blind. They have been known to eat people, as for example, people that were in a drunken stupor or something like that that couldn't get out of the way, and they can cause elephants to stampede. They have a tendency to go up the elephant's nose and bite him. When people are killed, or when larger animals are killed, it's usually by asphyxiation. On the other hand, they're an excellent pest removal service. This next animal is either a silver monkey or a blue monkey, depending on just exactly which language you use. I'm following the blue monkey with Lahost's monkey, or sometimes it's called the mountain monkey. Lahost's monkey, like all monkeys for that matter, is extremely curious, and this one seems to be wondering just exactly what's in that cloth bag. The next monkey we're going to be looking at is the Angolan colobus monkey. This monkey is extremely common in the Nyungwe forest. They can run around in quite large troops. This particular troop is a troop of 55 colobus, but in the forest there is a troop of 350 some colobus monkeys. That's the largest troop of Angolan colobus monkeys in Africa. Traditionally in English, the difference between an ape and a monkey was that a monkey had a tail, but an ape did not. That definition no longer quite holds, although it's still true that no ape has a tail. So if you see a tail on a primate, it's not an ape. However, there are some monkeys that do not have tails. For example, Barbary apes are actually monkeys. So what's the difference between a monkey and an ape? Well, it has to do with the construction of the shoulder and the wrist. Monkeys travel along branches much like squirrels or cats, but apes like to use their arms to swing from branch to branch, and that's the difference.